Here's your throne, king of crap.
The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner office, each droplet catching the neon glow of Seattle's skyline. I should have been reviewing the blueprints for the Morrison Tower project, the contract that would cement Reed & Associates as the premier architectural firm in the Pacific Northwest. Instead, I stared at the security footage playing on my laptop screen, watching my wife of 18 years destroy everything I thought I knew about my life. The timestamp read 2:47 p.m., Tuesday. I was supposed to be in Vancouver, negotiating with potential investors, but the meeting had been canceled last minute, and I'd returned home early to surprise Sophia with dinner reservations at that French place she loved. The surprise was on me. On the screen, Sophia moved through our bedroom with practiced ease, her auburn hair catching the afternoon light as she undressed. But she wasn't alone. Derek Blackwood, my former business partner, my supposed friend, emerged from our ensuite bathroom, shirtless and shameless, already reaching for my wife like he owned her. My hand tightened around my coffee mug until my knuckles went white. The ceramic cracked. I'd installed the security system 6 months ago after a break-in at our neighbor's house. Sophia had insisted we needed protection. The irony wasn't lost on me now. The cameras I'd installed to protect my family were exposing its destruction. Derek pushed Sophia onto our bed, the bed I'd handcrafted from reclaimed oak during our first year of marriage. She arched beneath him, her mouth forming words I couldn't hear but could read. "I love you." The same words she'd whispered to me that very morning. I slammed the laptop shut and stood, my chair rolling backward into the wall. 18 years. 18 years of building a life, a business, a legacy, all of it crumbling in a 4-minute video clip. My phone buzzed, a text from Sophia. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Love you." I stared at the message until the screen went dark, then hurled the phone against the window. It bounced off harmlessly, landing on the carpet with a muffled thud. The rain continued its relentless attack on the glass. Through the haze of rage and betrayal, a single thought crystallized. If Sophia wanted to play games, I'd teach her the rules. The law offices of Vasquez and Partners occupied the 32nd floor of the Columbia Center, offering a commanding view of Elliott Bay. Elena Vasquez didn't look up from her files when I entered her corner office, but her secretary had warned her I was coming. "Marcus Reed," she said without lifting her eyes. "I wondered when you'd show up." Elena was a predator in Armani, with sharp features and calculating dark eyes that had earned her a reputation as Seattle's most ruthless divorce attorney. She'd destroyed more marriages than a reality TV show, and her client list read like a who's who of the city's elite. "You know why I'm here," I said, settling into the leather chair across from her desk. She finally looked up, studying me with the intensity of a surgeon examining a patient. "Your wife retained Victoria Sterling yesterday morning. Preemptive strike. Smart woman." The words hit like a physical blow. Victoria Sterling was Elena's only real competition, known for her scorched earth tactics and her ability to drain clients of everything. If Sophia had hired her, this wasn't going to be a civilized dissolution. "What are my options?" I asked. Elena leaned back, her fingers steepled. "That depends on how dirty you're willing to get. Sterling doesn't play fair, and neither do I. But I need to know, are you looking for an equitable split, or do you want to make them hurt?" I thought of Derek's hands on my wife, of the lies Sophia had fed me that morning, of the 18 years I'd invested in what I now realized was a carefully constructed fraud. "I want to burn it all down," I said. Elena smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Then let's talk about what you're really dealing with. Your wife didn't just wake up yesterday and decide to leave you. This has been planned. Sterling doesn't take clients on short notice unless there's serious money involved. What do you know about your wife's recent activities?" "I know she's been sleeping with Derek Blackwood." "Your former business partner?" "Yes, I'm aware." "What else?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Marcus, successful women don't hire Victoria Sterling for simple adultery cases. There's more to this. Have you checked your business accounts lately? Your personal finances? Joint investments?" A cold dread settled in my stomach. "Are you suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you to go home, gather every financial document you can find, and meet me back here tomorrow morning. Because if I'm right, adultery is going to be the least of your problems." The house felt different when I returned that evening. The same modern architecture I'd designed. The same carefully curated furnishings Sophia had selected. But everything seemed hollow now, like a movie set waiting for the cameras to roll. Sophia was in the kitchen, preparing dinner with the same domestic efficiency she displayed for 18 years. She looked up when I entered, her smile as radiant as ever. "You're home early," she said, rising on her toes to kiss my cheek. "How was Vancouver?" "Cancelled," I said, studying her face for any sign of deception. There was none. After 18 years, she'd perfected the art of lying to me. "Oh, that's too bad. Well, James is at soccer practice until 8, so we have the house to ourselves." She returned to chopping vegetables, her movements precise and measured. "I thought we could open that bottle of wine you've been saving." I watched her work, noting the subtle changes I'd been too blind to see before. The new workout routine that had toned her body. The expensive lingerie I'd glimpsed in the laundry basket. The late nights at the office that had become increasingly frequent. "Sophia," I said carefully, "is there anything you want to tell me?" She paused, knife halfway through a carrot. For just a moment, her mask slipped, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or calculation. "Like what?" she asked, resuming her chopping. "I don't know. Anything. Work problems, personal issues, changes you're thinking about making?" She set down the knife and turned to face me fully. "Marcus, you're acting strange. What's this about?" I could have confronted her then. Could have thrown the laptop on the counter and demanded an explanation. Instead, I smiled and shook my head. "Nothing. Just work stress. You know how it is." Relief flooded her features. "Of course. The Morrison project has you wound up. Why don't you go relax while I finish dinner?" I nodded and headed for my home office, but not to relax. Elena's warning echoed in my mind as I booted up my computer and began examining our finances with the methodical precision of an architect reviewing blueprints. What I found sent a chill down my spine. Over the past 6 months, Sophia had been systematically moving money from our joint accounts into a private investment portfolio I'd never heard of. 50,000 here, 30,000 there, amounts large enough to matter, but small enough to avoid triggering automatic alerts. The investment firm was Blackwood Capital Management, Derek's company. My wife hadn't just been cheating on me. She'd been robbing me. And Derek, the man I'd trusted with my business secrets and my family's friendship, had been helping her do it. I printed every transaction record, every statement, every piece of evidence I could find. The stack of papers grew until it resembled a legal brief, which I realized it would soon become. My phone rang. Sophia's contact photo filled the screen. A picture from our last anniversary, both of us smiling at the camera like we had forever. "Hey," I answered. "I'm sorry, honey, but something came up at work. I'm going to be late tonight. Don't wait dinner for me." Through the kitchen window, I could see our driveway. Sophia's BMW was gone. She'd left while I was in the office, probably thinking I was too absorbed in work to notice. "No problem," I said. "I'll save you a plate." "You're the best. Love you. Love you too." I hung up and immediately dialed the number Elena had given me. Tommy Chen answered on the first ring. "Chen Investigations. This is Marcus Reed. Elena Vasquez gave me your number. I need surveillance." "When do you want to start?" I looked at the stack of financial documents, then at the security footage paused on my laptop screen. "Tonight?" Tommy Chen looked like he should be coding software instead of tracking cheating spouses. But Elena assured me he was the best private investigator in Seattle. He met me at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill, sliding a manila envelope across the small table between us. "Your wife is predictable," he said without preamble. "Same hotel, same room, same time every Tuesday and Thursday. The Fairmont Olympic, Suite 412, paid for by Blackwood Capital Management." I opened the envelope. The photographs inside made my jaw clench. Sophia and Derek entering the hotel. Sophia and Derek in the hotel bar. Sophia and Derek kissing in the elevator like teenagers. "How long?" I asked. "Based on the hotel records? 8 months, but I suspect it goes back further. They're comfortable together. This isn't new." 8 months. That meant the affair had started around the time Derek and I had begun discussing the Morrison Tower project, the biggest contract of my career. The contract that required complete trust between partners, sharing proprietary designs and financial projections. The contract Derek had mysteriously withdrawn from at the last minute, claiming conflicts of interest. "There's more," Tommy continued. "Your wife has been meeting with lawyers for 3 weeks, not just Victoria Sterling. She's been consulting with tax attorneys, forensic accountants, even a private wealth manager. This isn't just a divorce, it's a financial siege." He slid another set of documents across the table. "These are records from the private investigator your wife hired. She's been having you watched for 2 months. The surveillance photos of myself were surreal, entering my office building, meeting with clients, having lunch with my son James. But the most disturbing image showed me shaking hands with Derek at a restaurant, both of us smiling. "She's been documenting your relationship with Derek," Tommy explained, "building a case that you knew about the affair and approved of it. Consensual adultery. It's a legal gray area that could complicate the divorce proceedings." I studied the timeline, the careful documentation, the methodical planning. This wasn't just betrayal, it was warfare, and I'd been completely outflanked. "What else do you need?" I asked. Tommy's smile was predatory. "Access to Derek's company. I need to see exactly how deep this financial conspiracy goes. But that's going to require more than surveillance." "What are you suggesting?" "Industrial espionage. It's illegal, but so is embezzlement. The question is, how far are you willing to go?" I thought of 18 years of marriage, of the business I'd built from nothing, of my son who might soon learn his father was a fool. As far as necessary. The break-in happened on a Friday night when Derek's office building was nearly empty. Tommy had recruited a specialist, a thin, nervous man who introduced himself only as Spider, to bypass the security system and access Derek's computer files. I waited in my car across the street, watching the darkened windows of the Blackwood Capital Management offices. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel, and I realized I'd crossed a line I could never uncross. I wasn't just the wronged husband anymore. I was becoming something else entirely. My phone buzzed, a text from Tommy. "We're in." 45 minutes later, they emerged from the building with a flash drive containing Derek's entire digital life. Bank records, client communications, personal emails, everything. "You're not going to like what's on here," Tommy warned as we sat in his van, reviewing the files. He was right. The scope of Derek's operation was breathtaking. He hadn't just stolen my wife and my money. He'd been systematically poaching my clients, using inside information I'd shared to undercut my bids on major projects. The Morrison Tower contract I'd lost to a mysterious competitor? That competitor was a shell company controlled by Derek. But the worst revelation was in an email exchange between Derek and Sophia, dated just 3 days earlier. "Derek, the paternity test came back. You were right." "Sophia, I told you, James isn't his. This changes everything." "Derek, we can use this. Full custody, child support, the works. Marcus won't fight if he thinks the kid isn't his." "Sophia, perfect. By the time this is over, he'll have nothing left." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. James, my son, the boy I'd coached in Little League, taught to drive, planned to send to college, might not be mine. And my wife was using that as a tool against me. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I felt something break inside me. Not my heart, that had shattered days ago. Something deeper, something that had once believed in fairness, justice, and the basic decency of human beings. "We need to move fast," Tommy said. "They're planning to serve you with papers Monday morning. Once that happens, everything gets locked down legally." "What do you recommend?" "Preemptive strike. We file first, freeze all joint accounts, and hit them with criminal charges for embezzlement. But Marcus, once we start this war, there's no going back." "Are you sure you want to burn everything down?" I thought of James, who might not be my son, but had called me dad for 16 years. I thought of the life I'd built, the reputation I'd cultivated, the man I'd believed myself to be. Then I thought of Derek's hands on my wife, of their laughter in stolen moments, of the careful way they'd planned my destruction. "Burn it all," I said. Elena filed the papers at 8 a.m. sharp on Monday morning, 1 hour before Victoria Sterling arrived at the courthouse with Sophia's divorce petition. The look on Sterling's face when she realized she'd been outmaneuvered was worth the $50,000 retainer I'd paid Elena. By noon, Derek's assets were frozen pending investigation of the embezzlement charges. By 2 p.m., Sophia discovered her access to our joint accounts had been revoked. By 5 p.m., both of them were sitting in interrogation rooms at the Seattle Police Department. I watched the local news coverage from my office, feeling a savage satisfaction as reporters described the shocking financial scandal that had rocked the city's architecture community. Derek's company lost 3 major clients before the evening newscast ended, but my victory celebration was short-lived. Elena called at 6:30 with an edge in her voice. "They're fighting back," she said. "Sterling just filed an emergency motion claiming you're mentally unstable and potentially dangerous. She's also requesting immediate custody of James, citing concerns for his safety." "On what grounds?" "The industrial espionage. Somehow they know about the break-in. They're painting you as a paranoid husband who's lost touch with reality. A chill gripped me. How could they know? Someone talked, or someone was watching us while we were watching them. The implication hit me like a physical blow. In my rush for revenge, I'd left myself exposed. And now they were using my own tactics against me. There's more, Elena continued. Sterling has requested an expedited paternity test for James. She's trying to establish that you have no legal standing to claim custody of a child who isn't biologically yours. I sank into my chair, the weight of my choices pressing down like a physical force. In trying to protect what was mine, I had potentially lost my son, the one person in this mess who was truly innocent. What do we do? I asked. We prepare for war. But Marcus, you need to understand, this is going to get ugly. Very ugly. And there's no guarantee we'll win. Through my office window, I could see the Morrison Tower construction site, the project that had started this whole nightmare. The skeletal framework reached toward the Seattle sky like an accusation. I don't care about winning anymore, I said. I just want them to lose. The custody hearing was set for Thursday morning. James had been staying with Sophia's sister since the arrests, caught in the crossfire of a war he didn't understand. I hadn't seen my son, whether biological or not, in 4 days, and the separation was eating me alive. Wednesday night, I sat in my empty house, surrounded by legal documents and surveillance photos, when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw James standing on my porch, his soccer bag slung over his shoulder. "Dad," he said when I opened the door, "can I come in?" He looked older than his 16 years, his face drawn with stress and confusion. I'd tried to shield him from the details, but teenagers weren't stupid. "Of course," I said, stepping aside. "How did you get here?" "Uber. Aunt Lisa thinks I'm at soccer practice." He dropped his bag and looked around the house. "It feels different. Everything's different now." James nodded and sat on the couch where Sophia and I used to watch movies on Sunday nights. "Mom says you've been lying about everything, that you've been trying to destroy her life. What, do you think?" He was quiet for a long moment, studying his hands. "I think everyone's lying about something, but I needed to ask you directly. Are you really my dad?" The question I'd been dreading hung in the air between us. I could lie, could protect him from the uncertainty that was destroying me, but James deserved the truth. "I don't know," I said. "There might be a test that tells us for sure, but James, no matter what that test says, you're my son. You'll always be my son." Tears welled in his eyes. "Mom said if the test proves you're not my real dad, you won't want to see me anymore." I crossed the room and pulled him into a hug, holding tight to the boy I'd raised from infancy. "Your mother is wrong about a lot of things, but she's especially wrong about that. Biology doesn't make someone a father. Love does, time does. And I've loved you and spent time with you for 16 years. James sobbed against my shoulder, and I felt my own tears falling for the first time since this nightmare began. "I don't want you and Mom to hate each other," he whispered. "I know. But sometimes things break so badly they can't be fixed." We sat together in the gathering darkness, father and son clinging to each other while the world we'd known crumbled around us. The next morning, Victoria Sterling unleashed her opening salvo with the precision of a master tactician. She painted me as an unstable obsessive who had violated my wife's privacy, committed multiple felonies, and posed a clear danger to my family. "Your Honor," she said, pacing before Judge Patricia Hawkins with theatrical grace, "Mr. Reed's behavior demonstrates a complete break from reality. When confronted with marital difficulties, instead of seeking counseling or legal separation, he chose to spy on my client, steal from her alleged lover's business, and conduct an illegal surveillance operation. This is not the behavior of a rational person." Elena's counterattack was equally devastating. She presented the financial records showing Sophia's systematic theft, the hotel receipts documenting the affair, and the email evidence of the conspiracy to defraud me. "Your Honor," Elena argued, Miss Reed orchestrated an elaborate scheme to rob her husband of his assets, his business relationships, and his parental rights. She documented their relationship with Mr. Blackwood to make it appear consensual, then used that documentation to justify her theft. This isn't a marriage falling apart, it's a premeditated financial crime. Judge Hawkins listened to both sides with the patient expression of someone who'd seen every variation of human betrayal. When the lawyers finished their presentations, she called for a recess. "I want to speak with the minor child in chambers," she announced, alone. 20 minutes later, James emerged from the judge's office with red-rimmed eyes. He looked at me, then at Sophia, then back at me. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "I want to live with Dad." Sophia's composure finally cracked. "James, honey, you don't understand what's happening here. Your father has—" "I understand perfectly," James interrupted. "You lied to me. You lied to him. You lied to everyone. And now you want me to pretend it's all his fault." Judge Hawkins returned to the bench with a grim expression. "This is one of the most contentious custody cases I've seen in 20 years on the bench. Both parents have engaged in questionable behavior, and both have legitimate claims to parental rights." She paused, her gaze moving between Sophia and me. "However, the minor child has expressed a clear preference, and his testimony indicates that Mr. Reed has been the primary parental figure throughout his life. Pending the results of DNA testing, I'm awarding temporary custody to Mr. Reed, with supervised visitation for Miss Reed." Sophia shot to her feet. "Your Honor, this is outrageous! You can't give custody to a man who might not even be the child's father." "Miss Reed," Judge Hawkins said coldly, "I can and I will. Your behavior throughout these proceedings has been manipulative and destructive. Until you can demonstrate that you're capable of putting your child's welfare above your own agenda, your access will remain limited." Victoria Sterling was already scribbling notes for an appeal, but I barely noticed. James was coming home with me. Whatever else happened, I hadn't lost my son. But as we left the courthouse, I saw Derek waiting by the parking garage, his face twisted with rage. He'd been released on bail pending trial, and the suspended sentence had done nothing to cool his temper. "This isn't over," he snarled as I passed. I stopped and turned to face him, aware that several court officers were watching. "You're right, it's not. You think you've won something? You destroyed my business, my reputation, my life. For what? A woman who was never really yours?" "She wasn't yours either," I said quietly. "She was just using you, like she used me. The difference is, I fought back." Derek stepped closer, his hands clenched into fists. "You want to fight? Let's settle this like men." One of the court officers moved toward us, but I held up a hand. "No need. Derek's not going to do anything stupid. He's already facing embezzlement charges. Attack would just add to his problems." Derek's face went purple with rage, but he didn't swing. Instead, he leaned close and whispered, "Watch your back, Marcus. This isn't over." As he walked away, I realized the war was far from finished. I'd won a battle, but Derek was right. There would be more fighting ahead. And I was no longer the same man who'd started this journey. The betrayal had changed me, hardened me, turned me into someone willing to fight dirty and sleep soundly afterward. I was becoming the villain in my own story, and I was starting to like it. The DNA results arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by courier to Elena's office. I sat across from her desk, watching her face as she read the report. Her expression gave nothing away, but her fingers drummed against the mahogany surface, a tell I'd learned to recognize. "Well?" I asked. She looked up, her dark eyes unreadable. "You're not James's biological father." The words hit like a physical blow, even though I'd been preparing for this possibility for weeks. 16 years of soccer games, homework help, father-son camping trips, all of it built on a lie. "There's more," Elena continued. "The DNA profile indicates that Derek Blackwood is the father." I laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the office walls. "Of course he is. Jesus Christ, how long has this been going on?" Based on James's age, they've been involved for at least 17 years, possibly longer. 17 years. Our entire marriage had been a fraud. Sophia had been playing the long game from the beginning, using me as the stable provider while maintaining her relationship with Derek. I'd been the ultimate fool, the loser who paid for everything while the real father enjoyed all the benefits. "What does this mean legally?" I asked. "It's complicated. You've been acting as James's father for his entire life. In Washington state, that creates a presumption of parental rights regardless of biology. But Derek can now petition for custody as the biological father." "And Sophia?" "This actually strengthens her position. She can argue that the marriage was based on fraud, that she was protecting Derek's child by allowing you to believe you were the father. It's twisted, but Sterling will find a way to spin it." I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. Somewhere out there, Derek was probably celebrating his genetic victory while planning his next move. Sophia was likely crafting new lies to explain away 17 years of deception. And James, the boy I'd raised, loved, and considered my greatest achievement, was biologically the child of my worst enemy. "I want to destroy them," I said quietly. Marcus, not just defeat them in court, not just win custody or divide assets. I want to destroy them completely. Their reputations, their finances, their future prospects, everything. Elena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful. That kind of scorched earth approach has consequences. It could backfire legally, and it will definitely change you personally. Are you sure that's who you want to become? I thought of the man I'd been 6 months ago, successful, respected, naive enough to believe in the fundamental goodness of people. That man was dead, ended by surveillance footage and DNA reports. In his place was someone harder, colder, more calculating, someone who understood that the world was divided into predators and prey. I'm already someone different, I said. The question is whether I'm going to be effective. Elena nodded slowly. Then let's talk about Tommy's proposal. The plan Tommy outlined was breathtakingly illegal and devastatingly thorough. Using his network of contacts in corporate security, he'd identified vulnerabilities in Derek's remaining business operations, Sophia's new consulting firm, and even Victoria Sterling's law practice. We're talking about a coordinated campaign, he explained as we sat in his cluttered office above a dim sum restaurant in the International District. Financial sabotage, reputation destruction, legal entanglement. But Marcus, this crosses lines we can't uncross. Once we start this, we're all criminals. The old Marcus would have walked away. The old Marcus believed in justice through proper channels, in fighting fair even when the other side cheated. But the old Marcus had lost everything while playing by rules his opponents ignored. What do you need from me? I asked. Tommy smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Access to your old files, client lists, project specifications, financial data. Everything you shared with Derek during your partnership. We're going to use his own information against him. Over the next week, I fed Tommy everything I could remember about Derek's business practices, his client relationships, his personal vulnerabilities. It felt like planning a military campaign, with charts and timelines covering every surface of my home office. The first strike came on a Thursday. Derek's largest client, a tech billionaire building a private compound, received an anonymous package containing emails Derek had sent to Sophia, discussing how to overcharge the client for unnecessary architectural changes. The client terminated their contract within hours, citing ethical concerns. The second strike targeted Sophia's new business. She'd started a consulting firm helping women navigate high-asset divorces, positioning herself as an expert in protecting wealth from vindictive ex-husbands. Tommy leaked information about her own theft and fraud to her potential clients, along with court documents showing her pattern of deception. The third strike was personal. Derek had always been proud of his membership in the exclusive Rainier Club, where Seattle's business elite gathered for networking and deal-making. An anonymous tip to the club's ethics committee, accompanied by photographs of Derek entering hotel rooms with married women, resulted in his membership being suspended pending investigation. Each victory felt intoxicating, like a pills that demanded increasingly larger doses. I found myself spending hours planning the next attack, the next revelation, the next way to make them suffer. James noticed the change. One evening, as I worked late in my office, he knocked on the door. Dad, can we talk? I minimized the files I'd been reviewing, financial records that would allow us to target Derek's remaining clients, and gestured for him to sit. You're different, he said without preamble. Since all this started, you're scary sometimes. The observation hit harder than I'd expected. I'm fighting for our family. Are you? Because it feels like you're fighting for revenge. I studied my son's face, noting the worry lines that hadn't been there 6 months ago. At 16, he'd been forced to grow up fast, to navigate the destruction of everything he'd believed about his family. James, they lied to us for your entire life. They stole from us, manipulated us, planned to destroy us. Don't you think they deserve consequences? I think they deserve justice. But this isn't justice, Dad. This is war. He left without waiting for a response, and I sat alone in my office, surrounded by the instruments of my revenge campaign. Through the window, I could see the lights of Derek's downtown office building, most of the floors now dark as his business collapsed. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow, but not hollow enough to stop. The final confrontation came, appropriately, at the Morrison Tower construction site. Derek had requested the meeting through his attorney, claiming he wanted to negotiate a settlement that would end the hostilities between us. I arrived at sunset, when the skeletal framework of the tower cast long shadows across the construction yard. Derek was waiting near the base of the building, his once immaculate appearance now showing the strain of the past months. His suit was wrinkled, his hair unkempt, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. "Marcus," he said as I approached. "Thanks for coming." "What do you want, Derek?" He gestured at the tower rising above us. "Remember when we first designed this? We were going to change the Seattle skyline, make our mark on the city. That was before I knew you were planning to steal it from me." Derek's laugh was bitter. "Steal it? Marcus, I created most of those designs. You were always the businessman, I was the architect. But somehow, your name ended up on everything. The revisionist history was breathtaking in its audacity. You're rewriting the past now? I'm telling the truth, something you never bothered to learn." Derek stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Do you want to know the real truth? About Sophia, about James, about our entire history?" I didn't respond, but Derek continued anyway. "Sophia and I were together first, high school sweethearts, planning to get married after college. But you came along with your stability, your family money, your safe career path. You bought her away from me." "That's not how I remember it." "Of course not. You never saw her as a person, Marcus. You saw her as a prize to be won. So when she chose security over love, I let her go, but I never stopped loving her." The confession hung in the air between us, and I realized this conversation was being recorded. Derek was trying to get me to admit something incriminating, to give him leverage for the ongoing legal battles. "So, you waited 17 years to steal her back?" "I waited 17 years for her to realize her mistake. And when James was born, when I saw my son calling another man daddy, I knew I had to act." Derek pulled out his phone and showed me a photograph. James is a toddler, taking his first steps toward me while I knelt with arms outstretched. It should have been a precious memory, but now it felt like evidence of a theft. "I watched you raise my child," Derek continued. "Watched you take credit for his accomplishments, his personality, his future. Do you have any idea what that felt like?" I felt something cold and sharp twist in my chest. "You could have told me the truth at any time, and lose my son completely? You would have fought for custody, used your money and connections to keep him from me. At least this way, I got to be Uncle Derek, got to be part of his life." The manipulation was staggering. Derek had orchestrated 17 years of deception, stolen my wife, my money, and my business. And somehow, he'd convinced himself he was the victim. "You destroyed my life," I said quietly. "I reclaimed what was mine. The difference is, I had the patience to wait for the right moment." Derek's phone was still recording, and I realized he was trying to provoke me into a physical confrontation. One attack charge would undermine everything I'd built in court, give him and Sophia the ammunition they needed to paint me as unstable. Instead, I smiled. "You want to know the real difference between us, Derek? You're reactive. You wait for opportunities. I create them." I pulled out my own phone and played an audio file. Derek's voice filled the construction site, crystal clear in the evening air. "The kid doesn't suspect anything. Marcus thinks he's raising his own son, and Sophia keeps feeding him just enough affection to maintain the illusion. It's perfect. I get to be the real father while he pays all the bills." Derek's face went white. "Where did you get that?" "Your office. 3 weeks ago. Turns out your weekly calls with Sophia weren't as private as you thought." The recording continued, documenting their conspiracy in devastating detail. Plans to manipulate the custody battle, strategies for hiding assets, even discussions about eliminating me entirely once they'd secured their financial future. "You bugged my office," Derek whispered. "I did more than that. I destroyed your life, Derek. Your business is finished. Your reputation is ruined. Your relationship with Sophia is over. She's already talking to prosecutors about a plea deal that throws you under the bus." Derek lunged at me, his composure finally snapping. But I was ready. Months of rage had honed my reflexes, and I caught his swing, redirecting his momentum into the steel framework of the tower. Derek hit the beam with a sickening thud and crumpled to the ground, clutching his shoulder in pain. "You broke my collarbone," he gasped. "Consider it a down payment on 17 years of interest." I knelt beside him, making sure my voice was loud enough for his recording device to capture. "Here's what's going to happen, Derek. You're going to withdraw your custody petition, you're going to accept a plea agreement on the embezzlement charges, and you're going to disappear from Seattle permanently." Or what? I leaned closer, letting him see the transformation in my eyes. The death of the man who'd once believed in fairness and the birth of someone far more dangerous. Or I released the rest of the recordings, the ones where you and Sophia discuss having me ended in a staged accident, the ones where you threaten to manipulate James if he doesn't accept you as his real father, the ones where you laugh about destroying everyone who ever trusted you. Derek's eyes widened. Those recordings don't exist, don't they? I stood and walked away, leaving Derek sprawled on the concrete as sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called emergency, probably a construction worker who'd heard the commotion. As the ambulance arrived, I realized I'd crossed the final line. I was no longer seeking justice or even revenge. I was simply eliminating obstacles, using whatever methods proved most effective. The old Marcus Reed was truly dead. In his place was someone who understood that power mattered more than truth, that fear was more useful than love, and that winning justified any cost. I was becoming exactly what they'd accused me of being, a monster, and I was perfectly fine with that. The plea negotiations took place in Elena's conference room, with all the parties gathered around a mahogany table that had probably witnessed 1,000 similar surrenders. Sophia sat beside Victoria Sterling, her once perfect composure cracked like expensive porcelain. Derek was there via video link from his hospital bed, his arm in a sling and his face gray with pain medication. My client is prepared to accept the following terms, Elena announced, reading from a prepared statement. Full custody of the minor child, James Reed, with no visitation rights for either biological parent. Dissolution of marriage with no alimony or asset division beyond what's already been frozen. Complete ownership of Reed and Associates and all intellectual property. In exchange, Mr. Reed will not pursue additional criminal charges related to the conspiracy to defraud. Victoria Sterling's objection was immediate. Your Honor, those terms are completely unreasonable. Miss Reed is being asked to surrender all parental rights to a child she bore and raised, a child she used as a tool, Elena interrupted, a child whose paternity she concealed for 16 years while defrauding my client of millions of dollars. Miss Reed is fortunate to avoid prison time. Judge Hawkins had been presiding over family court for 2 decades, but even she seemed stunned by the scope of the deception. The evidence Elena had presented painted a picture of systematic fraud that stretched back to the beginning of my marriage. Miss Sterling, the judge said carefully, your client engaged in a 17-year conspiracy to defraud her husband. She concealed the true parentage of their child, stole marital assets, and attempted to manipulate custody proceedings. Under these circumstances, the proposed settlement seems remarkably lenient. Sophia finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I want to see my son. Your son? I said, speaking for the first time since the proceedings began. You mean Derek's son? The child you used to steal 17 years of my life? Marcus, please. No. I stood, my voice filling the conference room. You made your choice, Sophia. You chose Derek, chose the money, chose the lies. Now you get to live with the consequences. On the video screen, Derek tried to sit up straighter. This isn't over, Marcus. You can't keep a father from his child forever. I turned to face the camera, making sure Derek could see my expression clearly. Oh, watch me. Elena slid a document across the table to Victoria Sterling. These are the final terms. Sign them or we go to trial with everything. Every recording, every financial document, every piece of evidence we've gathered. Your clients will face federal fraud charges, racketeering accusations, and civil liability that will destroy them financially for the rest of their lives. The room fell silent. Through the conference room windows, I could see the Seattle skyline, including the Morrison Tower, which was nearing completion under my exclusive control. Victoria Sterling whispered something to Sophia, who shook her head violently. More whispered conversation, then Sophia buried her face in her hands. We need a moment, Sterling said. You have 5 minutes, Elena replied. After that, the offer expires. As the lawyers huddled with their clients, I stepped outside onto the building's balcony. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city, and I realized this was probably the last time I'd stand in this place as the man I'd once been. Tomorrow, if Sophia and Derek signed the agreement, I would have everything I'd fought for. Custody of James, control of my business, financial security. But I'd paid for it with my soul, trading the person I'd been for someone who could commit crimes without remorse. Elena joined me on the balcony. Having second thoughts? No, just wondering if there was another way. There wasn't. Not against opponents like these. They would have destroyed you piece by piece if you'd played fair. And what happens now, when James realizes what I've become? Elena was quiet for a moment. That depends on whether you can live with your choices. Some people break under the weight of what they've done. Others find peace in winning, regardless of the cost. Through the glass doors, I could see Sophia signing the documents, her hand shaking as she wrote her name. Derek was nodding on the video screen, his face resigned to defeat. It was over. I'd won completely, totally, without mercy or compromise. So why did victory taste like ashes? James was waiting in my office when I returned from the courthouse, sitting in the leather chair where I'd first learned about Sophia's betrayal. He'd grown taller in recent months, his shoulders broader, his face more angular. At 16, he was becoming a man. But what kind of man would he be, shaped by the wreckage of our family? It's done, I told him. You're staying with me permanently. He nodded slowly. And Mom? No custody, no visitation. She's signed away her parental rights. What about Derek? I hesitated. James deserved the truth, but how do you tell a child that his biological father is a criminal who tried to destroy the only family he'd ever known? Derek won't be part of your life, either. James was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the city lights beginning to flicker on. Do you hate me? The question hit like a physical blow. What? James, why would you ask that? Because I'm his son. Because every time you look at me, you'll remember what they did. I crossed the room and knelt beside his chair, forcing him to meet my eyes. Listen to me, carefully. You are not responsible for their choices. You are not defined by their DNA. You are my son because I chose to love you, to raise you, to invest 17 years of my life in making you the man you're becoming. Tears welled in his eyes. But everything was a lie. No, the marriage was a lie. The business partnership was a lie, but this... I gestured between us. This was never a lie. Every soccer game I attended, every homework assignment I helped with, every father-son conversation we had, that was real. That was choice, not obligation. James threw his arms around me, and for the first time in months, I felt something other than rage or calculated satisfaction. I felt love, pure, uncomplicated, and completely genuine. I want to change my name, he said quietly. Legally. I don't want to be James Reed anymore. I pulled back to look at him. What do you want to be called? James Marcus Reed Chen. If that's okay with you. The hyphenated name was a surprise. Chen was Tommy's surname, and James had grown fond of the private investigator during our legal battles. But the inclusion of my first name as his middle name felt like a gift I hadn't expected. Are you sure? I want people to know I chose my family, that biology doesn't matter as much as loyalty. As I held my son, the word feeling more accurate now than it had in months, I realized that despite everything I'd lost and everything I'd become, I'd gained something invaluable. I'd learned the difference between the family you're born into and the family you choose to build. The cost had been enormous. My marriage, my friendship, my reputation, and arguably my soul. But James was worth it. He'd always been worth it. 6 months later, I stood in the penthouse office of the completed Morrison Tower, looking out at a city that now felt entirely different. The building was a monument to my victory. 43 floors of steel and glass that dominated the Seattle skyline. Every morning I could see it from my bedroom window, a reminder of what I'd accomplished through will and ruthlessness. Reed and Associates had grown beyond my wildest expectations. Without Derek's sabotage, my firm had secured 3 major contracts, hired 24 new architects, and established satellite offices in Portland and Vancouver. Success, it turned out, was easier when you weren't being systematically undermined by your closest allies. Sophia had left Seattle entirely, taking a job with a small firm in Phoenix. The last I'd heard, she was living in a studio apartment and working for a fraction of her former salary. Derek had served 8 months in minimum security prison before being released to a halfway house in Spokane. His architectural license had been revoked, and he was reportedly working construction, building other people's designs for minimum wage. Some might call their fates cruel. I called them appropriate. The intercom on my desk buzzed. "Mr. Reed, James is here to see you. Send him in." James entered wearing his soccer uniform, fresh from practice and grinning with the enthusiasm of a teenager who'd just scored the winning goal. At 17, he'd grown into his height and developed the confidence that came from knowing exactly where he belonged in the world. "How was school?" I asked. "Good. Coach says I might get recruited by UW if I keep improving." He settled into the chair across from my desk, the same chair where so many of my enemies had surrendered over the past year. "Oh, and I got accepted to the summer architecture program at MIT, the one you recommended?" Pride swelled in my chest. "That's fantastic. You'll love Boston." "Thanks for everything. The program, the support, all of it." James had thrived in the aftermath of our legal victory, channeling his energy into academics and athletics with laser focus. His grades had improved, his social circle had expanded, and he'd developed the kind of quiet confidence that came from surviving trauma and emerging stronger. "Dad," he said, his tone growing more serious, "I got a letter yesterday from Mom." I felt my jaw tighten. What did she want? To apologize, to explain her side of things, to ask if we could meet for lunch when she's in town next month. The protective instincts that had driven my war against Sophia flared immediately. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing yet. I wanted to talk to you first." I studied my son's face, noting the careful way he was watching my reaction. At 17, he understood the dynamics of our family better than most adults understood their own relationships. "What do you want to do?" I asked. "I think I want to see her, just once, to get closure, I guess." The old Marcus would have forbidden it, would have cited the legal agreements and protective orders, but the man I'd become understood that some lessons could only be learned through experience. "Okay," I said, "but I want Tommy there, at a distance, just in case." James smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." As he left for home, I turned back to the window and the city spreading out below. Somewhere out there, Sophia was planning her return visit, probably hoping to manipulate James into giving her another chance. Derek was likely working his construction job, dreaming of revenge against the man who'd destroyed his life. Let them come, I thought. Let them try to reclaim what they'd lost. I'd built something stronger than their deceptions, something more durable than their manipulations. I'd built a family based on choice rather than biology, loyalty rather than convenience, and truth rather than comfortable lies. And I'd do anything, absolutely anything, to protect it. The sun set behind the Olympic Mountains, casting the Morrison Tower's shadow across downtown Seattle like a dark promise. In the fading light, I could see my reflection in the office window, a man transformed by betrayal into something harder, colder, more effective than he'd ever been before. Some people might call me a villain. I preferred to think of myself as someone who'd learned the most important lesson life could teach. In a world full of predators, the only choice was to become the apex predator yourself. And in that transformation, I'd found a kind of peace. The phone on my desk rang. Elena's number appeared on the caller ID. "Marcus," she said when I answered. "We have a problem. Derek's been making inquiries about James. He's hired a new lawyer." I smiled, watching the last light fade from the Seattle sky. Then I guess it's time to remind him why he should stay in Spokane. The war, it seemed, wasn't over after all. But that was fine with me. I'd discovered I was very, very good at war, and this time I wouldn't show mercy.